We all remember the stars differently. The Relentless docked 11 minutes ahead of schedule, all crew present, no distress signal, no damage report. That was the first thing wrong. Compact Station Edgefall sat anchored along the terminator line of the threshold, carved into the cliff face where scorched dayside rock met the frozen dark of the night hemisphere. A practical structure, not a beautiful one. Reinforced corridors bored directly into ancient stone, observation ports sealed against the methane winds rolling off the permanent ice to the west, every surface carrying the faint mineral smell of a world that had never been quite alive. Ships moved along the Terminator route with predictable irregularity. Survey runs into the uncharted transit corridors, beyond the threshold's orbital plane, were common enough that the station's docking registry treated them the way a port authority treats weather delays. Routine, expected, accommodated, with a floating schedule window of plus or minus 6 hours. The Relentless had been out 9 hours longer than its mission window. Ships that ran long came back damaged or came back broadcasting. The Relentless came back quiet, running lights on, docking sequence executed with textbook precision. The duty controller who logged the approach spent 40 seconds staring at her board before she filed the report. The ship showed no reason for concern, and every instinct she had was screaming anyway. She noted it in the margin. Crew behavior on approach channel, anomalously calm. Commander Yale Dross was the first one off the ship. She was compact by human standards, 163 centimeters of unadorned practicality, and she moved through Edgefall's docking arm as she always moved, with the economy of someone who had long ago decided that every step should go somewhere. Her dark eyes were level. Her expression was the expression of an officer returning from a completed mission. She greeted the dock supervisor by name, confirmed her crew count at 6, all present, and requested that debriefing begin immediately before rest rotation, because that was procedure, and Dross ran procedure the way some officers ran drills, with the understanding that the moment you treated it as optional was the moment it failed you. Compact Navy protocol for operations in uncharted transit corridors required individual isolation debriefs. No crew member in the same room as another. No comparison of accounts before each was independently sealed. It was a protocol designed for first contact scenarios and navigational anomalies, one of those procedural relics that existed because something somewhere had once gone badly enough to write it into standing orders. Most crews went through it as a formality. The debrief cells in Edgefall's cliff face section were small and cold, lit with the particular flat light of bureaucratic spaces everywhere, and the interviews usually ran 20 minutes each and produced reports indistinguishable from the ones before them. Dross gave her account first, as she always did. The debriefing officer was a mid-grade compact administrator named Horath, human, young, with the careful attention of someone good at his job and aware of it. He walked Dross through the mission timeline with methodical patience. She answered with the same. Survey run into corridor 7 Echo 9, navigational readings as expected for the first 4 hours. Then a gravitational eddy, uncharted, consistent with the corridor's known instability profile, that caught the Relentless in a slow drift for approximately 7 hours before the ship's corrective systems brought them back to beacon range. No weapons discharge, no contact, no casualties, one minor navigational recalibration logged. She had written the mission report during the drift period. It was time-stamped and clean. Horath thanked her, sealed the account, and began the sequential interviews. He was 4 accounts in when he went quiet. The 5th interview was Chief Engineer Voss. Voss was Dreth, 2 meters and 20 centimeters of dense muscled certainty, scaled skin the deep gray-green of canyon rock, cranial ridges sitting flat and unlit in the cold station air. Dreth, who left their homeworld of Dreth Ka, carried their gravity with them in the architecture of their bodies, in the slow, deliberate way they occupied space, in the fact that their hands could bend the same alloy plating they spent their careers maintaining. Voss had served in the compact Navy for 19 years. He was not the kind of being who speculated. He told you what the instruments read and expected you to believe him, because the instruments didn't have reasons to lie, and neither did he. Voss described no gravity eddy. He described a weapons exchange. 40 minutes in duration, he said. Close range. He named 3 separate firing solutions the Relentless had run in sequence. He described the heat bloom in the engine compartment from the secondary rail running hot. He described the damage control rotation he had personally supervised, the repair sequence, the names of the 2 crew members who had worked alongside him. He described an unidentified vessel, not a compact profile, nothing he recognized from the standard registry, that disengaged and accelerated out of sensor range, approximately 40 minutes in. He had filed a damage log, he said. It should be in the system. There was no damage log. Horath sat across from Voss for a long moment, Dross's sealed account open on his screen. The gravity eddy, the quiet drift, the clean return, and then looked at the engineer's amber, slit-pupiled eyes, at the ridge patterns dark and still across that broad skull, and read the scent certainty of a Dreth who was not confused. Voss was not reporting a different version of events. He was reporting events. Horath sealed the account, walked to his superior's office, and handed the problem upward. The debriefing expanded. 6 accounts, 6 interviews, each sealed before the next began. Horath ran them in sequence over the following 4 hours, while the Relentless crew waited in separate quarters, physically intact, none of them showing the physiological markers of acute trauma, which the station's medical officer noted in her own report as being, in itself, a data point worth flagging. The human crew member assigned to secondary operations, a young woman named Petra, with the specific calloused hands of someone who had spent hours working with hull patch applicators, described spending the missing 7 hours conducting external repair work after a micro-impact on the ship's ventral surface. She named the tools. She described the sequence. She described the particular cold of the threshold's orbital plane coming through her suit during the EVA, and the way the stars had looked from outside the ship. The callous patterns on her palms matched, precisely, the wear profile of the tools she named. Whatever she remembered, her body agreed with her. The Velhari navigation specialist, Ovensek, described nothing. That was not quite accurate. Ovensek described the missing hours as quiet, a deliberate running dark protocol, the ship's systems minimal, while Commander Dross conducted a long-range communication sequence with a compact signals relay. Routine contact. Nothing notable. Ovensek sat in the debrief cell with the particular compressed stillness of a Velhari under sustained stress. The exoskeleton drawn slightly inward, reducing that upright height by several centimeters. The bioluminescent markings on thorax and upper arms cycling at a frequency outside the resting state baseline. Blue-white at rest, the markings had been shifting toward gold since docking, slow oscillations that never quite settled. The kind of cycling that compact xenobiological documentation described as sustained fear recall. The body processing something the conscious mind was not yet ready to fully surface. Ovensek described nothing. The light in the chiton said otherwise. When all 6 accounts were laid side by side, they shared exactly 2 data points: the mission start time and the docking arrival. Everything between was different. Not approximately different. Not the normal variance of human or Dreth or Velhari perception across a shared experience. Structurally different. Each account was internally consistent. Each was supported by physical or biometric evidence that could not be fabricated quickly and could not be faked easily. And each was incompatible with every other in ways that were not matters of perspective but of physical law. Either the weapons exchange happened or it didn't. Either the EVA happened or it didn't. Either the ship ran dark or it didn't. The black box recorder was pulled from the Relentless by Edgefall's technical team under the personal authorization of the station's senior officer. Standard procedure. The recorder was a sealed unit, tamper-evident, authenticated against the ship's core systems through a cryptographic chain that was, according to compact engineering doctrine, beyond the reach of in-field modification. It contained 3 log threads, each running concurrently through the same elapsed time window, each time-stamped correctly, each authenticated against the ship's core chain. The technical team lead sent her report upward with a single appended note. This is not possible under current compact engineering doctrine. No apparent irony. She simply wanted it on record that she understood what she was looking at. That was when the request went out to Arch-Speaker Sane. He was at Edgefall for a diplomatic function, a renegotiation of transit rights along the threshold corridor, 3 days of careful conversation between compact representatives and a delegation whose concerns were legitimate and whose patience, by the second day, was fraying. Sane had been managing that fraying with the gentle precision that 280 years of doing exactly this kind of work produces in a person. He moved with the deliberate economy of an old Velhari, exoskeleton darkened nearly to black with age, compound eyes catching the flat station light without expression, spare and unhurried in the way of someone who had long since stopped needing to perform patience, because patience had simply become the shape of him. He read the briefing once, set it down, looked out through the armored viewport at the Terminator line, at the place where scorched rock met the dark, and was quiet in the way that was not blankness, but calculation. He told his diplomatic staff he would be unavailable for 2 hours. He walked to the debrief wing without an escort and identified himself to Horath's superior as an observational presence, not an interrogator, not a commanding officer in the chain of investigation, simply someone who had been asked to observe. His rank made refusal difficult. His manner made refusal feel unnecessary. He sat at the back of the primary review room, read every account, and said nothing for a long time. Dross, meanwhile, was not standing down. She had been formally separated from command authority for the duration of the investigation. Standard procedure when a commander's account was under active review, and accepted this the way she accepted most things that came from above. She nodded, she complied, and she began working the problem from whatever angle remained available. She requested access to all 6 sealed accounts simultaneously, which was irregular enough that Horath's superior had to make 3 separate calls before deciding that denial would cost more than approval. Dross was not looking for contradictions. The contradictions were already there, thoroughly documented, getting no one anywhere. A room full of compact investigators was already working them and producing increasingly technical reports that all arrived at the same conclusion: unknown. What Dross was looking for was the opposite. She went through 6 accounts, 6 incompatible chains of events, 6 separate physical realities occupying the same elapsed window, and looked for what was absent, not what disagreed, what was simply not there. It took her 40 minutes. In every version of the missing hours, not one crew member mentioned the 7th person aboard. She checked the mission manifest twice. It was real, filed before departure, authorized by Compact Operational Command, time-stamped and clean. A Velhari technical observer, name formally registered, assigned to the mission at the last moment by a routing order she hadn't questioned, because routing orders from Compact Command were not the kind of thing a 7th Expeditionary Commander questioned. Bunk assignment on the Relentless, confirmed. Personal equipment manifest, confirmed. Dietary requirements logged with the ship's provisioning system. A real person, documented at every stage up to departure. Not one crew member, across 6 structurally incompatible accounts of the same 9-hour period, had mentioned this person once. Dross pulled each crew member back in, one at a time, and asked a single question. Who was the 7th person aboard the Relentless? None of them could answer. Not evasively. She had interviewed enough people under enough circumstances to know evasion, the micro shifts in attention, the particular texture of a pause that was choosing instead of reaching. This was not that. It was the expression of someone trying to retrieve a word that was not at the tip of the tongue, but behind some barrier they could not identify. A slot in memory that should have held something and simply didn't. A door that was not locked, but was not there. Voss, who could recall 3 firing solutions and the names of the crew members beside him under weapons fire, sat across from her with his cranial ridges flat and his amber, slit-pupilled eyes steady, and said, with the full weight of a Dreth who did not fabricate, that he could not tell her. Not that the person hadn't been there. Not that he had forgotten. He could not tell her. Petra's hands, calloused by tools held during hours that may or may not have existed, held the same blankness. Oven-sex bioluminescent markings burned solid gold. Dross brought it to Sane, not as a request, not as a question. She walked into the review room where he was still sitting with 6 accounts spread across the table and laid down her finding without preamble. Every account was different, every account was wrong relative to every other, but every account shared one consistent feature: a shared absence. Not a shared memory, a shared erasure. One person, documented in every record up to departure, present in no record after it. Every version of the missing hours had been written, somehow, by a crew that did not remember there had been a 7th. Sean looked at what she put in front of him. He was quiet for a long time. Not the quiet of someone processing new information, but of someone who had been holding a particular shape in their mind for a very long time and was watching the space around it finally fill in. Dross read people as a professional habit. The fleet developed the skill or discarded the officer, depending on whether you survived your first command. What she read in the slow cycling of his thorax markings was not surprise. The blue-white had not shifted toward gold, had not spiked toward red. It held steady in something older and more deliberate than alarm. It was not the specific, contained urgency of someone confronted with the genuinely unknown. It was something older and more careful than that. The markings of a being who had found the thread he had been waiting for someone else to find first, and who was not yet certain whether he was relieved. Outside the viewport, the Terminator line held its ancient boundary between fire and ice. The methane winds moved unseen in the permanent dark to the west. The Relentless sat in its docking arm, quiet and intact, full of people who had all returned from the same mission and none of them from the same place. Sane did not speak. The silence was its own answer, not the absence of one, but the shape of one too large for the room they were standing in. Larger than the investigation, larger than 6 accounts and 3 black box threads, and the name of a Velhari technical observer documented everywhere and remembered nowhere. The silence said that the compact had seen something come back from the dark before. The silence said the 7th crew member was not a casualty. The silence said that the compact's most patient diplomat had been patient about this, specifically for reasons that were not yet in any file Dross had access to. In the space between her certainty and his silence, the weight of what had happened out in Corridor 7 Echo 9 settled fully into the room, not as a mystery waiting to be solved, but as a door that had been opened from the other side. The question was no longer what had come through it. The question was what had been let in.